So everyone is rolling.
Yeah.
Action.
Yeah. So hi, Joseph.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. So it's good to talk to you. And Cyrus and I, we had a conversation earlier on about the whole scandal, debacle, pain that Kanye West has been causing with his comments. But besides that, and there's not much besides that, we wanted to figure out certain themes that he sort of discussed and the validity of those claims, you know, in particular about the cultural industry in America, you know, Hollywood and the music industry, which happens to have a high concentration of people with Jewish descent, and why that is historically, and also, is this something that we should start having conversations about? Because at times it feels like once that comment is made, that the conversation is shut down, and then anti-Semitism is
So first I'd like to backpedal. The reason the conversation was shut down wasn't because Kanye said there's a lot of Jews in this industry. It's because he associated some sort of collusion between those people, and then the more he spoke, the more you realise he's a hardcore anti-Semite. He literally got up on Alex Jones' podcast and said, "I like Hitler." He said that nobody should put the word evil next to Nazis. It's like the reason the world was like, "Whoa, mate," is because he was a hardcore anti-Semite, not because he said people with the surname that ends in Berg or Steen are disproportionately represented in a certain industry.
Anything that could have been excavated from those early comments, which is completely.
So many people say there are disproportionate number of Jews in certain professions, and there's many good reasons for why that may be the case.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with saying that. People say it all the time. The issue is when you start creating some sort of conspiracy, how they're conspiring, there's a cabal, they're working together to do something, either for the benefit of themselves or even worse, against other people.
Exploitative,
It seems now, in light of his most recent comments on Alex Jones's show, it almost seems frivolous just to even try to excavate some sort of meaning from his earlier comments. So where do we go?
I think I just wanted to kind of segue into the idea of like this idea that there are Jewish executives who predominantly are in a particular profession and are making millions and millions of dollars.
So there's lots of black rappers making millions and millions of dollars. Is that a problem?
I think
no. Well, so why is it a problem that Jews work in an industry?
The idea is that there is some sense of, and that's not what I'm saying.
Are you saying that Kanye was exploited? He made $2 billion. He was the richest artist there ever was.
But he
like richer than most Jews.
Let me frame it like this. So there is a perception, or this might be a fact. It's perceived that a disproportionate number of the people in the most powerful positions in the music industry in America are of a particular demographic.
Many of them are male. Is that a problem?
No, I'm just.
No, I understand the reason I'm being facetious.
Yeah, that may be a problem.
No, it is a problem. I don't think it's a problem that you maybe have more males than females. That's not a problem for me.
Saying, so where opportunities are restricted to a certain group of people, be it male or older.
That's my point. Who's restricting?
Okay, so where roles in the top echelons of an industry are dominated by a particular demographic.
You're saying that's because of a restriction?
I haven't made any
Okay,
claims
sorry.
yet.
Sorry, I'm used to debating people. I've got to calm down. Well, what do you mean?
We're actually going to have a conversation here. So where it's then perceived that demographic of people makes a huge amount of money from the depiction of another group of people dominated by a particular demographic, where they are like the glorification of crime within that community is used to make a huge amount of money for the other group of people who are in those very powerful positions in that industry. Do you feel like there are at least grounds for a conversation about why?
I don't think that's what's happening. Like that's really not my take on what's happening.
I mean,
my take. So take the rap industry. You're talking about rap music, basically, not anything else.
Yeah.
Jews make terrible rappers. If you listen to the Beastie Boys, not good. Lil Dicky, not good. And it's not a problem that Jews don't make the best rappers. It's just.
But the Beastie Boys weren't talking about
you're missing
each other.
The Jews. So this is the thing. I absolutely hate these arguments where it removes the agency from those that are doing it. So if someone wants to go out and rap about murdering or raping or doing that, that's on the person who's doing it. I would say if someone else is profiting from that, they're also involved in it. Right. But the real agency is on the person who's making those. If you're saying that there's a Jewish manager that's going to a gangster rapper and saying, you must rap about this, I'd say that's problematic, yeah? But I haven't seen any evidence of that. Okay. The people who come to the park that are rappers, and you listen to what they're doing, they're talking about the same gun culture and stuff. It's like this is the culture. This is for whether that's positive or negative. If you're wanting to make money in that industry, that's what you're going to be making money from. Very few people are making Christian rap. Very few people are making Muslim rap. It's just.
But what would you say about those allegations where it said that there are particular business practices that these executives are...
Jews, that's where it's racist. You're saying that Jews engage in unethical... Okay, that's the accusation by Kanye. Kanye saying that why are Jewish people hated since forever? Because they engage in these practices. That's what he's saying. And I'm saying they don't. Yeah. Literally, so take Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin's probably one of the. I don't know much about hip hop, but I know that he's one of the biggest executives in that industry. Are you seriously saying that he's somehow evil or engaged in immoral practices, and that all the people who he makes billions of dollars for and millions of dollars for and creates an entire career for are absolved of any content that they're doing that's problematic?
The argument precisely is that these rappers it's an illusion, they aren't making the money that they were supposed to.
Kanye West was worth $2 billion.
I know, but this was outside music. But what I'm trying to say is that he famously...
Paul McCartney's worth $1.5 billion, just for context. Kanye was richer than the Beatles.
Yeah. But...
One example that I gave was that, in the New York rap scene and labels like Def Jam, for example, there have been documentaries about the origins, the relationship between people like Leo Cohen, Russell Simmons, for example. Those look like organic relationships between people with common interests who built businesses out of those interests.
Besides their ethnicity.
In a way, I kind of lost the interest in kind of asking questions about Kanye West's comments. To be honest with you, it's kind of,
because really and truly,
I felt like there was a conversation to be had. And he went so far beyond the other.
So this is my thing. There wasn't a conversation to be had. Everybody Kanye is not the first person to say there's a lot of Jewish executives in the hip-hop scene. Yeah. He's not the first person to say there's a lot of Jews in Hollywood.
Here's where the conversation lies.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Do you agree that there is
of course there's disproportion.
No, that this perception exists.
No, not the perception that... sorry, finish.
The perception exists that, for example, large swathes of the entertainment industry are dominated by Jewish executives.
I wouldn't use the word dominated, for one. And you have to show me how they dominate. That's a very strong word.
In the sense that a large proportion of the top jobs are occupied by...
But what's a large proportion?
My only reference at this point is a graphic that
I went through that graphic with a red. Half of them aren't Jewish. You literally can pull it up now. There's someone called Sweeney, and none of the minute I start saying these names, I'm okay, these don't strike me as very Jewish. But if you were to say that the Jews are disproportionately represented in the music industry, in the executive, if you were to say that Jews are disproportionately represented in communism or capitalism or any of these political or economic, yes, I'd agree. You saying disproportionately, Jews, as an example, Jews have won more Nobel Prizes for science than any other people.
My question is
with the exception of white people.
That they are disproportionately represented. Yeah. My point is, do you agree that there is a perception that this is so?
Yes, if we're saying we think they are, that's a perception. So yes.
Okay, I'm saying, do you feel like there are a large number of people who feel like this kind of conspiracy theorists, and they kind of focusing in
The
on
tropes,
this
you know,
idea.
So let me the one of the communities is disproportionately represented in tech at executive level are Indians.
Yeah.
There's no collusion.
We came up with
We-
another. Like, we were like, look, there's this old adage that corner shops in Britain are
No,
historically
but that's
owned by-
that's not good because the reason you have
It's
Jewish.
trivialising it, I understand.
Yeah, what you're doing, you're saying
I'm saying it would be a legitimate question. No one would get offended. But why is it the case?
no, because a
that
corner
certain
shop wields no influence or power over society. If you're running Facebook or if you're running Twitter or if you're then
I'm just trying to
or
create an entry
Google.
point into the
So,
conversation.
but
about-
you give, for example, many of the banking families were Quakers, as an example. A few people know that. So, like most of the big British banks, like Barclays, HSBC, they were Quakers.
no one's like, oh, the evil Quakers.
Exactly. But there would be a legitimate question to say if you notice that a group of people are disproportionately represented in film, you can ask why. Is there something sinister going on?
Yeah.
Or is it something cultural? Or is it sort of nepotistic? Is
That's
it like
what we want-
whatever?
That's the conversation
Yeah,
we want
And
to
so,
have.
and so when it comes, I can tell you categorically, when it comes to Jewish representation in any of these industries, it's not because of some conspiracy or nepotism or anything like that. It's the actual opposite.
Guys, can you pause for a second? Change the battery. Pause.
Why is there this perception? And why is it that when it is mentioned, that it seems like the first thing that people want to say is anti-Semitism? You know, that's sort of like, because
Right, guys, rolling. Action.
yeah, because you know the reason why I was saying like, it seems as if that if you bring up this conversation for obvious reasons, and we discussed this on his channel, that for 2,000 years, people of Jewish descent have been persecuted because of these tropes and these myths that have been told about them. So it seems as if that before we segue into that again, we nip it in the bud as quick as possible. That's maybe why that defense mechanism is
So
there.
I don't think there's a defense mechanism to saying that Jews are disproportionate. Like, one of the things that I expect as a Jewish person, you go around, one of the things you constantly have people come up to you and ask, why are Jews doing so well in this field or that field? And it's a question that's asked to many Jews. It's like, this is not something that you're not allowed to talk about. The issue isn't saying, I happen to notice lots of actors are Jewish or lots of executives in Hollywood are Jewish. Or lots of people, Jews are disproportionately represented in finance. None of that is taboo.
But what
the issue
control
Is the
is the conspiracy. Yeah, it's the you look at a group of people and you project on them some sort of malice, some sort of evil intent, or not even necessarily, just some sort of like collusion, some conspiracy. I mean, that's literally where the word cabal comes from. It came from Kabbalah. I didn't even know that. It was like an anti-Semitic trope. There's a cabal of Jews. It comes from the Kabbalah. The fact that Jews are disproportionately represented in certain industries is my explanation purely cultural. I grew up in a white working class community in the north of England, and despite coming from a Jewish background, we didn't grow up around Jews. And what I noticed when I moved to London to live amongst the Jewish community was there was just a huge different culture. The kids would look up to like politicians and like in the Jewish community and like people you'd want to that are quite inspirational. Well, we looked up to footballers and like DJs, and it's a very different culture. And the education, I compare my education to my wife's education. Like, she was taught how to take an exam. I was never taught how to take an exam. I was taught to attend, like turn up so we can collect the money from the state and just coast through your education. And I went to a rubbish state school. There were stabbings. There was all this stuff you'd get in an inner city school in London. And so the reason that you will see certain communities excel, Nigerians are example. When Nigerians go to America, they do very well because it's culturally they're more affluent Nigerians, and they outperform most immigrant communities. Chinese are the same, Indians are the same. There's cultural reasons why certain communities do better than others. And if someone were to say that actually these Nigerians, and they say that about Nigerians, they say they're all scums, but they were to say these Nigerians that come up, they're conspiring, they're working together and they're colluding against the white man or the black man or whichever man they want to portray as the victim, that's when it becomes problematic. There is no collusion, there is no conspiracy. The reason Jews are disproportionately represented in these fields is because they go to university, they apply, they excel in these fields. Individuals excel, not Jews, but individuals excel, and they do well. And
But would you not say that's like an industry like Hollywood? It's really pretty much a lot to do with who you know as well. So it's like a nepotism going on there. So therefore, by default, a lot of the Jewish people who get into these positions is because.
so I don't know if you follow the politics of the Jews in Hollywood.
Yeah.
They're incredibly liberal, incredibly left wing, all for affirmative action. All the like. This is not. These are not nepotistic like evil capitalists conspiring to keep the wealth within like a small. These are the most liberal, progressive people you could imagine. Like they are as woke can be.
Yeah.
And there is no like.
But recently, they've turned woke
there's this
recently.
perception that the Jewish community tends to rally around its own.
Yeah,
which is a brilliant,
but listen,
which I really
American Jews are assimilating. That's not the case for American Jews.
Right.
American Jews are not. Like, if you were to say that Orthodox Jews tend to be quite insular, I wouldn't disagree with you. Like I believe in like sincerity, having an honest conversation. And Jews, Orthodox Jews, are certainly the more Orthodox you become, like Haredi, ultra Orthodox, the more insular they become. In the same way that Muslim communities, the more religious you get, the more insular it is. The Jews we're discussing, they have no religion, they have no God, they marry non-Jews, they've got no like affiliation at any like. Can't speak for all Jews, but these are not people that are like nepotistically keeping it within the Jewish community and like not mixing with non-Jews. It's the opposite.
Okay.
It's like these are very, very progressive liberal Jews. As if we were to make generalized assumptions about the people we're talking about, as in Hollywood executives and.
I think this conversation is highly important because it's been mystified and it's been hijacked by a lot of these conspiracy theories that, you know, there is this cabal, like you were saying, build around. And then also for someone who like ends up and says, oh, all Jewish executives on Google, right? And he finds like hundreds of them. And then the correlation he makes is like, well, Kanye West has been saying this. I'm here saying it myself. There must be something to it. And then the correlation is made.
So the thing with conspiracy theories, there's almost always a kernel of truth, and that's how it's able to go. There's very few conspiracy theories that don't have something which people can hook onto as a truthful statement, but then it's the ill intent that they then attach to that, it's the exaggeration. And so I notice a lot of people come, and what they'll say they're Jewish because their great-great-grandfather came to America and was Jewish. Doesn't matter that every single one of his other 16 grandparents or whatever are not.
So you open the door to this question. So there's this perception that these high, powerful positions in American entertainment are occupied by Jews. The problem is the conspiracy theories that are attached to that. You said every conspiracy has a kernel of truth. So
yes.
if you had to speculate, what would you say would be the kernel of truth in that, behind that particular
There are
conspiracy?
numerous executives in Hollywood who have Jewish ancestry.
Okay.
That's the kernel of truth.
But the conspiracy that there's some sort of malign intent.
Exactly. So you look and say, okay, well, this person's great-great-grandfather was Jewish. This person's wife is Jewish, which is literally what this meme says. This person has a German name, which I think is Jewish, which Berg's, all those things, they're all German names. This is the problem. The problem is that there is some truth, and then it's where you take that. And I think what's really important is that you must be able to discuss truths without people saying you can't say that there are Jews in Hollywood. But like I'm looking at the credits and I'm saying like a Goldberg, and I say Whoopi Goldberg, who by the way changed her name to Whoopi Goldberg so she could get ahead in Hollywood. Now that's anti-Semitic. Thinking if you change your name to Goldberg, you're going to get ahead somehow. But the problem isn't observing a reality and speaking a truth and speaking an objective truth. Jews are disproportionately represented in these fields. It's where you take that truth and what you do with it.
Because I think that's what Kanye did, right? He was like, well, I've dealt my whole 20 years being in this industry, and I had the people who wrote the contracts, the people who were handling me happen to be Jewish.
This is the insanity of Kanye West. Like, let's say all of this is true. Let's say all of this is true. Those Jewish executives made him one of the richest men in the world, if what he's saying is
He
true.
said himself he was the richest black man in history.
Not just black man, he's the richest artist ever. I mean, there was that African guy who was richer than any. But so he's not the richest black man ever, but he's a very, 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 very rich, forget black man, very rich man. He's the richest white or black musician ever. Like, that's phenomenal. And yet he's complaining about like being exploited by like the insanity. Like, he had enough money to feed all of America, and he's complaining that.
But there is an interview I watched 2 years ago, and Leo Cohen, he came under fire a bit, and it was an interview where he was being asked about why is it that, because he was running this
The Breakfast Club.
yeah, he was running 300, exactly 300, which was just a subsidy label from Universal, I believe. And he was asked, why is it that you sign in particular people who have like very, very dubious and problematic past, being involved in gang culture, or people who struggle with drugs? And his response was a bit lackluster and a bit like sort of like, you know, very cold, you know. And Larry Cohen
was like, I've got mouths to feed.
Yeah. Lee Cohen has, you know, it was the typical, well, I'm a businessman and I do business, you know. So
But what's that got to do with, like, okay, so let's say that's true. Let's say, I've never seen the interview, I've got no idea, I don't even know who the guy is.
Yeah.
But let's say everything that you said is true. What's that got to do with the fact he's Jewish?
No, because these are the examples that people use.
But Suge Knight, Suge Knight, like, I'm so like, I'm the most uncool person that's appeared on any of your channels.
Vanilla Ice.
And so I'm just like, I mean, in fairness, in fairness, if Ye came out against being against Vanilla Ice, I'd be with him.
Yeah. But you see, these are sort of the examples people use.
But what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is, the agency. If someone is involved in glamorizing, like literally all these vices, like the person who's glamorizing is ultimately like at fault. Yes, it's bad that other people benefit and profit from that. Yeah. But if it wasn't, like, I think I've never seen the interview, so I don't want to really comment on it. Yeah. But I'd imagine the argument is, well, if I wasn't doing it, someone else would, and it's completely legal. I'm not breaking any laws, and if it is illegal, then I won't do it. And so then you get into the ethics of business, and like, these are all separate conversations. The issue here is it to do with him being Jewish? And no, it isn't. And and is he conspiring with other Jews?
Frankly, referring back to that graphic again, where it was like the list of like top exec positions, and then in kind of an inflammatory way, like all of the ones that he claimed were Jewish were all in red, and the screen was like covered in red, and there were a couple of spots where it wasn't. If you've analysed that, and if it's not factual,
I'll just quickly pull it up and just show you. I only did the first column, but like someone else did loads more, and I'll just very quickly pull it up. I'll have to find it.
It's interesting how powerful the imagery was at the time.
So here we go.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to see, this is on the Israel Advocacy Movement. If you just do my tweets and replies on Twitter. So that's the wrong one. I need to go to profile, tweets and replies.
So if
one final thing. Do not take your proofs from Kanye West. Basically, if Kanye's showing you a meme, you should certainly be fact checking it.
That's it. But so going back to what Nick Fuente was saying about, Jewish being able to charge interest to non-Jews and not.
That's truthful.
Yeah.
But that's not unethical.
Okay, but what he was saying is that inspires the business practices of Jewish executives.
Does it?
In the business in the music industry. I know it's far-fetched, but again, I'm putting it to you because I feel like we have to discuss these things. People need to hear about.
You're a Muslim.
Yeah.
It says, "Do not take the Jews and Christians as your friends." Does that inspire like you to treat non-Muslims in a really negative way when you're living in their lands? No, of course not. And so anybody can take a line from a religion and twist it. So basically the philosophy behind the charging interest, not charging interest, is if I know somebody and they're bound by my religious code, so I know they're religiously obligated to repay me under threat from heaven, like I'm threatened, my world to come is threatened if I don't repay this loan, I'm going to pay this back. If I'm living amongst, which is when these laws were designed, if I'm living amongst pagans who sacrifice their children, I've got no assurance that if I give them this money, it's going to come back to me. Therefore, I will loan it out, but I will say you have to pay back interest, and that covers the risk. The interest model is what created the incredible societies that we live in, because it enabled people to loan money to other people and factor in the risk, mitigate the risk of losing that money through defaulting, through theft and everything else. And so interest is not evil, in my opinion. But to not charge someone interest is a very noble and kind thing to do, but you need some sort of protection. And so from a religious philosophical position, if someone has a fear of heaven, from a Jewish understanding, and we know we're bound by the same code, I'm going to be more trusting. Similarly, if I see someone as family, I'm probably going to be more trusting of them than if a stranger comes up and asks for money. And so that's it. If you want to say that cultivates the likelihood that Jews will exploit non-Jews, I would strongly disagree with that. And actually, I think the reality is the opposite. Jews give disproportionately more money than any other people. We're commanded to give 10 to 20% of our money away, like charitable, every year of what we earn. And on top of that, the biggest philanthropists in the world, almost all of them are Jewish. And you could say that's because they're affluent and they're at the position. Really? That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
so I like learning things. That's really cool.
No, but yeah, this is precisely sort of like, you know, the argument that is being made. And I mean, you broke it down here as to why that happens. But, you know, when you have someone like Nick Fuentes who knows about this stuff, and then...
I mean, Nick Fuentes doesn't know about this stuff. That's my point.
No, he knows... I mean, he knows...
Nick Fuentes goes on Google, finds an anti-Semitic website, Nazi website, where they've quoted some dodgy lines from the Talmud, doesn't read the Talmud, and just quotes what it says on these dodgy websites. Kanye West is a student of Nick Fuentes. So like this is not a scholar of Judaism.
But it's good that you broke this down, because this is something that you may start to hear quite often, because it's now in the public's perception.
You mean that Kanye West is mainstreaming anti-Semitism? Absolutely. Kanye West is mainstreaming anti-Semitism.
About possible reasons why certain business practices are practiced in the way they are practiced.
Who's saying that other than Nick Fuentes?
I mean, I've heard it before. It's not the first time I've heard this. You know,
so you think, you think that there's a mainstream position, like a common belief, that Jews have bad business practices because of their religion?
No, not at all.
Okay.
There is a belief that Jewish business people are very good in exploiting populations under the guise of...
Is this something you hear a lot?
I mean, we've been hearing this for the last 2,000 years in Europe.
No, but I'm talking about you particularly. Do you hear this?
I mean, yeah, whenever, not in my personal life, but when I'm online, when I hear people who do criticize Jewish people.
But that's what I'm asking about, like real life, not what like I can go on the internet and I can find people who believe they are their animal spirit is a unicorn. It doesn't mean it's a common belief. I'm asking, do you experience these beliefs?
It's a held belief, right?
I speak to lots of people, and very few people make the association of the Jewish religion.
George Soros and all these guys.
No, there's anti-Semitic conspiracy, but very few people bring it back to the religion.
Like the whole Rothschild.
They're bringing it back to the religion. So the religion, it comes from Christian Europe, where Christians would say these verses in the Talmud are problematic. So but it's not a mainstream thing. It's not a new thing, but it's not a mainstream thing. I never encountered this.
What you are saying is that there are certain religious principles that would dictate that Jews may treat each other differently in business from how they would treat non-Jews. No. It's one thing, one literal interest. That's the only thing.
Okay. And every religion has discriminatory laws in it, which discriminate between the practice of that faith and the people outside of it. I could go to Islam and the kuffar, I go to Christianity and the infidels. It's literally all religions do this.
That's kind of why I wash my hands of religion.
I can completely understand that position. Religions tend not to be universal. I mean, they're often imperialist and they want to absorb everyone into them, but they usually single out their people to have a particular code of laws that separates them from.
Yeah, but so recently, I don't know who it is. There's some Hollywood don, I think of Jewish ancestry, and he was saying this as well. He was saying that we have to have these conversations.
Yeah.
We have to have these conversations openly. And because of the woke brigade and the liberalism, I feel like there is a considerable amount of people who feel like and I'm playing the devil's advocate here, so Joseph, do not attack me personally, because I understand, honestly, I was saying this to Cyrus earlier, I do understand where the fear comes from. It's a justified fear that a lot of Jewish people have. For example, I told him the story, I was invited to a get-together of a friend of mine, she's a curator, and there was 2 Jewish friends of mine who were there, acquaintances, and they were talking about sort of like their experiences as Jewish people in the UK and the things they experience in the art world. And there was one friend of mine actually who was campaigning against what were anti sort of, like when the whole what was the opposite of the woke situation? Alt-right. Yeah, like when the alt-right thing, the alt-right movement was sort of gaining steam. There was loads of these people who were also involved in the art world, and someone like Shia LaBeouf, and do you remember there was this whole thing around him?
No.
Right.
It's not my area though. So
okay, yeah, but there was a whole like sort of like 4chan like esque, groups of people online again who was trying to push really the boundaries as to how to define the whole situation, because he was politically standing against Trump and also standing against the anti-Semitism. So, and there was particular artists in the art world who were really, really pushing boundaries. And I remember being there with them, and they were talking about their experiences. And I was like, wow, this is very familiar. I've heard this before. It really reminded me of the conversations that I would have with a black person about our experiences, being in the Western world. So I was moved by that, that there is like this very deep trauma that exists amongst the Jewish people, again, for obvious reasons. It's not something they just make up. So I am of the understanding why
the fear of the propagation of narratives begin to smell like things that have happened in the past.
So that is that perhaps the reason why there is this protectionist?
But I don't think there is this protection. So there's no issue with saying that Jews have received more Nobel Peace Prizes, more Nobel Prizes than most other ethnic groups, certainly proportionate to their size. Jews are disproportionately represented as solicitors or as executives in Hollywood or as actors.
Jews control the banks.
But that's different to saying that Jews are disproportionately represented.
Yeah.
Because there you're suggesting there's some sort of collusion where these Jews are controlling. That's the issue. And it's those anti-Semitic tropes that were contributed to the Holocaust, as an example.
Yes,
so they looked at banking families like, this is the curse of being a Jew. So in Europe, they would curse the Jews because they were peasants and disgusting and dirty and poor. But they'd simultaneously, out the other side of their mouth, curse the Jews for being so rich. And they'd look at the Rothschilds or the Oppenheimers and they'd pick small families and say, look how wealthy these Jews are. And they would then look at the Jews in their community and say, look how poor these dirty, disgusting Jews are. Send them back to Palestine, is what they literally... They used to have graffiti in the UK that said Jews back to Palestine. Now they say Jews out of Palestine. It's like, make up your mind, guys. We're poor, we're rich, we're in Palestine, we're out of Palestine. It's just anti-Semitism. And there's nothing wrong with speaking truth. And if it is truthful that there are Jews are disproportionately represented in a field, everyone talks about that. It's not like no one's talking about that. You can literally watch movies where they make jokes about it. It's like...
But you see the correlation between... It's not that when you look at the positions that these Jews have, executive, meaning you have a considerable amount of influence or even a say in a company. Now, I'm saying devil's advocate.
Who do you think is richer, Ari Emanuel or Kanye?
Aria,
the guy, the executive that Kanye's really gunning for.
Yeah.
Who do you think is richer, Kanye or the executive?
I didn't.
No, it's a question. Just because you're saying the power that they wield. So
purely from the music.
Yeah.
Well, the executives tend to be more wealthier than the artists.
Not true. Kanye was worth more than 4 times what the executive.
Kanye is an exception. I'm saying the rule is, generally speaking, the executives tend to be in any industry more richer than...
I'm not sure that's okay. An executive takes a percentage of what the talent makes, and so the talent tends to be more richer, unless you have someone who's got so many hugely rich people that they make. But these we're not talking about exploited. Like, we're not talking about someone who's coming from some horrible slum in New York. Who's like, we're talking about one of the richest men in the world. I would say if you want to point the finger at anyone, point it at the guy who's pointing an Uzi at the camera, talking about bitches and hoes.
I think that's a fair point, and I think that person should bear some responsibility. But
I would
also
say
the people behind the camera and the people signing the
no,
checks.
no, I would say he bears the majority of the responsibility. Many of these people go on to, like, not many of these people, there are examples of these people, some of these rappers going on to commit crimes and being parts of gangs and associated with some of the lowest, like, so like, don't take away their agency. Like, they are responsible for their actions, and it doesn't absolve the executives that are involved. They also are responsible, but the ultimate responsibility is the person who's putting out that message, like who's conceiving it, writing the lyrics, shooting the videos, and so it doesn't absolve. If there are Jewish, Muslim, any executives behind that who also capitalizing on that talent, then they also are partly responsible. But the ultimate responsibility, unless someone's holding a gun to someone's head and saying you're going to write these horrible lyrics and glorify his violence, then it's on the artists.
Do you know anything about Kyrie Irving's situation?
So I took 5 months out, so I don't know the film he shot. Like, I've stopped making videos. I've only just come back. Yeah. So I don't know enough about Kyrie Irving. What I would say, I know a lot about the Black Hebrew Israelites who he's part of. So I can talk about them. I can't talk about the film he linked to because I don't know which film he linked to.
Okay, yeah. So the conversation goes, because it's kind of coinciding with the whole Kanye thing. So the conversation goes that he shared a link to a documentary that was on Amazon, Capitalism, and he was then.
You can also get Mein Kampf on Amazon. But that's the insanity. Like, they want to throw like Twitter off the off the App Store, etc. Yet you can buy Mein Kampf on Amazon, and that's fine. It's the censorship. There's no sense to any of the censorship laws.
I know, it's crazy. But like, so he was then being penalized, I believe, by the NBA. But then also there was someone figure. Again, I think he was Jewish himself, bald-headed guy, some high-shot guy who was telling him basically, you should cool down, come talk to me and whatever. And then I start seeing very horrible memes of like the bald-headed.
Yeah, I saw the Gollum meme. Yeah.
Him sort of like, controlling Kyrie Irving. But like, what? Because obviously the documentary, from what I understand, talks about the idea that the real Jews are
Black men, and not just Africa, Hispanics and the indigenous Americans. They're the real Jews, not the actual Jews.
And the Jews who, are known.
The Jews that lived in Iran, and the Jews they're the fake Jews.
Jews. So do you reckon? So is this a discussion that is a historical debate, or is this something that you would also classify as anti-Semitic?
It's not anti-Semitic to believe you're Jewish. You're just wrong. There's nothing. If Kyrie Irving wants to believe that, and maybe he does. Maybe he descends from an Ethiopian Jew, or there are communities in Africa that are legit Jewish. They have a tradition, which I'm not going to question, that goes back centuries and centuries and centuries. Correct. That they're Jewish. Cool. The Black Hebrew Israelites are not the same. They're people who don't. They read the Torah, the Old Testament, and they project they extrapolate from that they interpret the text of the Old Testament as that they're the real Jews. There's no memory, there's no historic collective memory, there's no Hebrew in their families. Like, if you go to an Iranian Jewish graveyard in Tehran, if you go to a Jewish Polish graveyard in Poland, if you go to a Moroccan Jewish graveyard, you'll find Hebrew, you'll find a tradition going back thousands of years of these communities being Jewish. The Black Hebrew Israelites don't have that. There's a 2,000-year gap between them, what they're claiming, and there's no evidence. There's nothing to substantiate their claim. It's just how they interpret the text, and people can interpret religious texts however they want.
How do they justify the absence of that record in their own history?
So before we go there, I think it's a very beautiful conversation. I just wanted to say, because it's kind of like the topic you were talking about. It's a different
conversation.
But why was that like this penalizing situation going around him, and you don't know too much about
I can't talk about it because I don't know enough about it.
Because I think
but what I would say, I would say, if you are saying, like, I don't know if you saw the Hebrew Israelites marching down, like literally like a militia through New York. When you have a large group of men dressed in similar clothing, it has negative
Yeah.
connotations usually.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter what community you're from, if it was white people marching, Jewish people marching, if it's like, and they're marching, we are the real Jews, like the inference is all these other Jews are not real Jews.
Yeah.
That it's slightly problematic. I think they're completely entitled to believe that. I believe
Yeah.
they're not real Jews. I don't think I'm being hateful to them by saying that.
Yeah.
And I'm,
But they don't think they're being hateful to you by saying
the groups themselves are deeply anti-Semitic. So there's different churches, so you can't associate them all the same.
Yeah.
But some of them are. So for instance, I'll give you there's a lot of anti-Semitic hate crimes that come from these communities. Like there was shooting where they went in with machine guns and shut up kosher shops.
Wow.
Like there's not much between them and neo-Nazis. And actually, on the wake of the whole Kanye stuff, I put a video out on this. Kanye West has done one thing, and I don't want to say credit to Kanye West, but he's actually got white supremacists, neo-Nazis, the worst neo-Nazis in the world. Mark Collett, Andrew Anglin, like these are the biggest, most vile neo-Nazis on the planet. And they're all now endorsing a black man. So to his credit, he's brought white supremacists over to the black community, which is fair play, Kanye.
It is also very scary to see that there is this very deep sentiment against Jewish people to this day, that with even combined enemies, reconcile
It's not
enemies.
so there's a horrible picture from my perspective of back in the 60s, the Nation of Islam holding a big talk. And at the front of the Nation of Islam, you have the American Nazi Party with the swastika sitting in the front row. It's like neo-Nazis have historically been willing to put aside their prejudice to work with the black community. It's weird.
Enemy of my enemy.
Exactly. I see it's no different to Tommy Robinson. And there's a guy called James Goddard, I don't know if you know him, but he used to be a big anti-Muslim, and he'd ring me up and he'd literally beg me to do a video. And I said, no, it's not. I'm not anti-Muslim. I'm not making a video with you. And he's now a neo-Nazi. But he wanted to work with me because it's like, you're a Jewish, you must hate Muslims. No, it's like, and so I think people have, like Tommy Robinson's the same. You go to a Tommy Robinson's march, an EDL march, you'll see Israeli flags. And now Tommy Robinson's made a video calling Kanye West a G and saying like, it's fantastic that he's talking about this issue. It's like, well, make up your mind, Tommy.
Maybe. Yeah, but this what I'm trying to say. So like with Kyrie Irving, for example, there was this like thing where he was penalized for sharing. So perhaps, only perhaps, I feel like there's still more room, and there has to be people like yourself who come out and say, hey, look, let's have this conversation. Let's deconstruct all these things that are being talked about. Because I don't think that it always transpires like that in the news.
I think, as a general rule, most Jews have a good radar for detecting anti-Semitism. So when people, like both of you, come up and have a sincere conversation, can't we talk about this? No one's going to watch this and go, these guys, they want us dead. They want another Holocaust. No one's going to watch this conversation and think that that's the like what. But when we watch Kanye coming out with memes, like literal Nazi memes, that all these people that aren't Jewish are actually Jewish and they're trying to control the world and they're responsible for the Holocaust. And so,
sorry.
I am Jewish. If that was the question, and
while you try and reconnect that thought, it's sad because the fact that we're having like a chilled, sincere conversation inevitably means that these videos are not going to get the views that some of the like much more incendiary content gets, which is kind of sad. Like that's the reason why this Kanye stuff has got so much traction, is because it's so offensive.
Don't worry, I'm just going to name my YouTube video Kanye fan says that Kanye fan attacks Jews.
Actually, it was interesting about the what was mentioned about the banking systems, or the origins of the banking systems. It's more of an academic issue, but it'd be nice to have a chat about, because there are records about the origins of the credit-based banking systems that were established in Babylon, like post-exile, I believe under the rule of Darius the Great. So it'd be nice to have a chat about that. We still have the names of the families that ran those first banks.
So I definitely have to do my research. Well, that's not my one, but yeah, we can wrap it up. My one's still on you, but this is someone else's.
But guys, sorry, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for this. Thank you.
Jazakallahu. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice conversation. Jospeh, quick wrap up. So what happened there, Jospeh?
So very, very quick for the cameras. So they've been watching Kanye West, and they thought there was a stigma, or they believed there was a stigma about talking about Jewish representation in different industries. They thought people would say it's anti-Semitic. They say that the Jews are disproportionately represented in Hollywood, Jews are disproportionately represented in the banks, and I just wanted to point out that that's not the case. People talk about this all the time. The issue is when you think that there's some sort of conspiracy between people from a particular ethnic group, and that's the problem. It was a very peaceful conversation, very polite conversation, no hatred from any of the people in there. So it was very, very ref speaker's corner. A Muslim and a Jew and an atheist, I think an atheist, or a Zoroastrian, I'm not sure, agreeing.
An agnostic Iranian.
An agnostic Iranian.
Yeah, big up. Nice, well, thank you. So they should subscribe to
Israel Advocacy Movement on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook.
Well done, Jospeh. Thank you.
No, thank you.